All right, my friends, so just taking my walk, a little bit of a sprint here too, and listen to James Grant from Grant's Interest Rate Observer being interviewed by the guys and gals over at Morningstar, and the level of absurdity, and I like Jim Grant. I got a couple of his books, man. I'm a big fan. But the idea that young people don't know what inflation is like and they're going to be caught off guard, or they are being caught off guard, unlike us seasoned veterans, I find it just so freaking stupid. I'm sorry, it ticks me off. Jim, what's the biggest component of inflation? You want to take a guess there, guy? I know he knows this. It's housing. Shelter, 32% of inflation, CPI. You take core inflation, which does not include the volatile energy and food, and shelter becomes over 50% of CPI. So for young people trying to buy a house, they certainly know what the hell inflation is. What is this badgering of the young people? I'm sick of it, man. I just talked to a guy today. I went to a thing on how to butcher a hog down in Atlanta at Pine Street Market. It was actually held at the Second Self Brewery, which, I don't drink, so it looks like a good brewery. They actually have this chocolate beer, chocolate something, I can't remember. I was like, dude, that sounds freaking fantastic. If I was a drinking man, I'd be drinking that. Chocolate. Forgot what the guy said. Anyway, and the guy next to me, 29 years old, lives in Woodstock. He does project management for a construction team. On the side, he's building freaking smokers, like, those 50-gallon barrels. He's building them. I said, how'd you learn that? And he showed me some pictures on his phone. I said, how'd you learn to do all that, man? He goes, man, I just, over weekend, I'd volunteer to bring some welders, ribs and stuff, and I'd bring them some beer if they just showed me how to weld. And what he does, his whole setup is fantastic. I said, dude, that guy is going to be that guy's crushing. But he's only 29, Josh. He doesn't know what inflation is. Crazy. And I said, man, stop discounting the young generation. These guys, yeah, some are weak. You think some of the baby boomers weren't weak? You think some of my generation weren't weak? Man, we're a slave to the grind of corporate America. All right, anyway, so I just want to go back and say, wait. So CPI, as we measure it, we know for a fact 42% of all CPI is housing, of which of that 42%, 32% shelter. We know that they try to have core CPI to get rid of, again, the volatile stuff of energy and food, which is insane to me. But so core CPI is 78%. So 42% of the entirety of the CPI. Now 42% of 78, 42 divided into 78 means about 60% of core CPI is housing related. And you're going to tell me young people don't know what inflation is? That just is so freaking stupid. So stupid. Just because their computers cost less, and their TVs cost less, and their textiles cost less, and their freaking, not their food, but food's gone up moderately, but other things have gone. Try to buy a house. Yeah, that's a big CPI for them. The biggest expense for young people by far and away is housing. So just because it isn't reflected in Jim Grant's CPI, it's certainly reflected in the budgets of working younger people. That's for damn sure. Inflation is so high for young people. That's why they stay with mom and dad until they're 30, and yet they get laughed at. Like, you're living in your parents' basement. Yeah, because because the Fed drove up the assets. That's asset inflation. Stocks and real estate and bonds all had huge inflation because the Fed, quantitative easing, which priced a lot of young working people out of the market for a home, which I'm telling you, is ultimately a good thing. Because that means these people didn't take on a lot of debt, hopefully, to buy a house, hopefully. Debt that they couldn't afford, that before they would get. They say, oh man, you can afford a house, it's only 3% interest rate. Yeah, a mortgage, a payment till death, a death debt. These guys don't know inflation. My freaking behind, man. Go buy a house and tell me you don't know inflation. That's inflation, just because it doesn't represent some guy whose house is paid off because he has cheap goods, because we've been getting all manufactured all overseas for cheap price, doesn't mean it's not reflected in regular people's budgets.